guys, this is Yoda. Figured I'd do a quick tier list update since I've had the chance to play with a bunch of new specs and basically all the dungeons have been revealed so far. There has been some showing of all the top specs. Right now I would say Hunter and Frosty K, Ranged Hunter and Frosty K are doing insanely large amounts of overall, so it makes sense to put them in the S plus tier. They will probably both be nerfed considering how much damage they do. Like, they're overperforming in raid, overperforming in every dungeon. It just needs some tuning. And then Arcane Mage and Boomy are both doing this competitive overall. I would say they're roughly same as in the S class DPS, but their funnel is insane, and also they still have all the same utilities that we love them for, like mirror images, making dogs just into target dummies, raid buffs, and just general immunity and druid buffs, you know, Mark of the Wild, Grip Beam, etc. So don't see Arcane Mage and Moonkin going anywhere. Potentially Hunter will not be nerfed that much, and you can play one in the physical combat instead of Rogue, but, you know, we'll see. As for tanks, I have moved them around quite a bit. Personally, Paladin got a really big buff, which I'm really happy about. Their 4 set was really bugged on day 1, so it was insanely overperforming, but it got nerfed, or hotfixed rather, and now it does pretty good damage. Paladin is doing competitive damage, I would say, with Warrior and VDH, even if you count their buff, which is kind of crazy for a tank to be doing that much damage, but that is where you want to be as a Paladin. On top of that, Blizzard has kind of shown a trend in the recent dungeon pool, like Arakara, Dawnbreaker, Halls, and I want to say Gambit, all feature, actually not Gambit, but at least Halls, Dawnbreaker, and Arakara, and maybe some more, all feature mobs that apply a debuff to your tank on melees. So parry is very valuable, and dropping debuffs is also very valuable. So you know, Paladin has the highest parry in the game because you play high crit and you have the 15% parry node. DH technically could have more parry if you play Omega high crit, but whatever. You also have Dwarf and Bubble and Spell Ward / Bop to drop debuffs. So I think Prot Pally is actually uniquely positioned really strongly against those. You still have not that great self-sustain, although Lightsmith self-sustain is pretty good. And you are still somewhat weaker against melees, but so far melees have not really been that challenging. It's really been the debuffs that are applied to the tank on top of something else that I've noticed. There's a lot more bolts in this season that target the tank. For instance, in Gambit, there's like Hyper Light Bolt that targets the tank only. And there's also Water Bolt at the start. It doesn't target the tank, but it's like on a cooldown, so it's much more easier to deal with. Halls of Atonement, Wicked Bolt only targets the tank. Villainous Bolt only on the tank. Anima Infused Bolt only on the tank. Basically, there's just a bunch of dungeons with all these bolts that really only target the tank. And Paladin is really good at dealing with those because you're now the only class in the game that can block spells. And you also just have like a large volume of interrupts with your Avenger's Shield. For instance, if I do a lot of those pulls on my Warrior or potentially Brewmaster, not sure about Brewmaster, and even as DH sometimes, you might need to call for AoE stops for yourself, just bolts that are being cast on you, whereas Paladin would almost never really need to do that. So Paladin is uniquely really strong against those and against all the debuffs that are being applied. That said, once again, Paladin is still the weakest tank against random melees and has really bad self-sustain. But in my opinion, the 2 best healers at the moment are Resto Druid and Disc Priest, and those have really, really good passive tank healing, so Paladin is able to take advantage of them. For that reason, I am actually moving Paladin to the S tier, considering it has really good damage and is uniquely situated against the dungeon pool to be very effective. For the same reason, I've actually moved Warrior down to the A tier. So one thing that Warrior is really bad against is melees that have extra effects. So Warrior's main mitigation against melees is blocking, right? Shield block. What block does is reduce the damage that the melee does to you, but it does not do anything against the extra effects that the abilities are doing to you. So for instance, like when a Gargant attacks you, you will block the melee, but you'll still get a stack of the bleed. And the bleed is by far the more dangerous part of the melee. Same with like the random Dark Blades. They attack you, they do a hit that you block that does no damage basically, but then it also applies a debuff that increases your damage taken. So Warrior's kind of bad against that type of thing, and it's also not great against bolts now, because especially with the removal of spell block, people always ask me how does Warrior feel without spell block. I would say before this week, Warrior was kind of chilling without spell block. These 2 dungeons, Gambit and especially Halls that we got this week for testing, are really, really like It feels really bad not to have a spell block in those dungeons. You basically have to call an AoE stop rotation just for yourself, which is what I talked about earlier, for those bolts, which can be really annoying. Also, obviously, blocking Gargan bleeds is not very effective, so there's that too. So I moved Warrior back down to the A tier, even though it does still have, it's really strong against melees, and it's really good self-sustain with Fueled by Violence. It's just really weak, in particular against certain things that are in the dungeon pool. And the damage post-nerf is not as good, I would say, as Paladin or Brew, even though it's still really good. And you still have a Battle Shout, so I wouldn't worry about the damage. I would more worry about just the dungeon pool being super unkind to Warrior with a bunch of bolts that target the tank and really bad debuffs that are applied by melees. The other tanks, VDH, no real changes. VDH is uniquely not that good against debuffs. It does have really high parry, especially if you play Illuminated Sigils, basically the same parry as Paladin. And it has really good self-sustain and just innate damage reduction, so it's pretty good against the bolts, but certain things like debuffs just can stack up against DH, and you don't have a way to drop them. Like, against, like, in the first area of Halls, for instance, I was feeling kind of okay. If something bad happened, like we ninja pulled extra, then I probably wouldn't be able to handle it. But, like, once we got to the second area, there's a mob that just applies Mortal Strike, and you pull 3 of them at the same time, or at least I was. And if they all apply to you, you can't heal yourselves. You have no way to drop the dot. So DH is really bad against that type of thing, whereas Paladin can actually live. But in other dungeons, I would say DH is still going to be, like, fine. And especially when you're comboing with the Moonkin, Grip Beam into Silent Sigil is still extremely powerful. But I wouldn't count VDH out yet. It's still really good. It's just there's a couple things that it's not super, like, effective against. But, it's still VDH. So we're going to keep it in the S tier. Brewmaster has been, trending way upwards ever since the patch dropped with the rework and all their fixes to certain things. Damage is insane for Brewmaster, especially with the recent buff to Mystic Touch. I foresee a lot of physical comps playing with the Brewmaster and doing insanely high amounts of damage to low target count pulls. I really wish they would have gone the opposite direction and just, like, nerfed all the raid buffs instead of randomly buffing one of them because they thought it was weak. But it is what it is. Mystic Touch is now 8%, so for instance, the physical comp that some Europeans are playing with, and even some Americans with, like, Brewmaster, Resto Shaman, Feral, Arms, and Rogue, I think that comp could be really good. Potentially may need to replace the Rogue with a Hunter, considering how much damage Hunters are doing right now, but, we'll see how it goes that way. One thing Brew is still missing, though, as we mentioned, is it's not as good against debuffs. You can play Dwarf Brew, and you do have pretty high natural dodge, especially with your mastery, but it's not as good as dealing with bolts. It's not as good as dealing with random debuffs as a DH or Paladin would be. The only thing it really has going for it in that regard is the fact that you can play Dwarf. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention about Paladin. One of Paladin's weaknesses, especially in Season 2, is that you cannot play Night Elf. So every single skip that you wanted to do, you cannot do, but if these skips pop up in next season, you actually can do them as a Proud Paladin because you have Umbra Essentia. It's massive. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. Brewmaster is definitely looking good. I personally don't like playing it that much. Everyone knows I kind of like tanks that can do really good control or help the party a lot more. Brew is not really that. You basically are really tanky, assuming your healer is alive. And you do a lot of damage, but in your utility, you have, like, a couple Vivifies you can throw at people, some Dispels, Sweep and Rot, but it's not in the same ballpark as a DH, Warrior, or Paladin, in my opinion, utility-wise. For healers, Rest of Druid still looks super OP, even after the nerf. I have a feeling it's going to get toned down again because it's performing well in Raid with, like, a dungeon build, so that's kind of crazy. Disc, even though people are unhappy with it, is still looking very good next season. I would not be surprised to see a lot of Disc Priests playing next season. I don't know if they're going to nerf it, but it is what it is. If it is the meta healer next season, that's 3 seasons in a row, which would be kind of crazy for Blizzard to let happen. Not sure what they will do. As for the DPS, Rogue got pretty big buffs this week. Assassination Rogue got 8% just flat. So it definitely lands in the S tier in my opinion. Maybe S+, we'll see. Outlaw, I think they kind of doubled down on a really bad tier set, so now even if it was good, it's still, like, super unfun to play, I think. At least in my opinion. Maybe it belongs in the A tier, maybe not, who knows. We're just going to leave it in B because we're pissed off about the tier set. Havoc still looking pretty good, even though it did get a small damage nerf. Shadow Priest still looking really good. Don't think it quite belongs in S+, Maybe. Honestly, it kind of does belong, I suppose. I'll put it there. It does really high damage. I'm just waiting for the Shadow Priest nerf. That's inevitably going to happen because it overperforms in raid. But Shadow Priest is very, very strong in Mythic Plus right now. One of the 2 specs that can actually heal a group with damage. You know, since they removed AG, we still have Nature's Vigil and VE from Shadow Priest. I'm not sure how it will fit into the meta. Maybe you just play Shadow Priest with Resto Druid, or Disc Priest with Boomy. I don't know. Or you play all of them with like Resto Shaman or H-Pal. Who knows? Demo Lock got a really big buff. It is doing very good damage right now, and Fire Mage is also doing pretty good. For healers, honestly haven't really seen enough Arsham to have a solid opinion of it. Mistweaver and Voker both can do the healing, but they're, you know, missing raid buffs. Although Mystic Touch is very good. Maybe I could see like Warrior and Mistweaver or something with a physical comp. Did get the chance to play with H-Pal. It feels actually not bad, especially when paired with a Warrior. Warrior just has really good synergy with Paladin because like one of the Warrior's weaknesses is debuffs, right? For instance, in Dawnbreaker, like the Necrotic debuff. In even Arakara, the debuff on you can get freedom from the Paladin. And in Halls, the bleed debuff can be AoE kick with Bop. Like AoE taunt with Bop is a really good combo against that. So I think it pairs pretty well, Protpally and H-Pal. But yeah, H-Pal just seems like it does pretty... It's basically the same as the current season, in my opinion. It's pretty good, but not as good as the top healers. For the rest of the DPS, I haven't really had the chance to play with them. Nothing has really changed. They still do pretty good damage. Still viable in the right comp, but probably not as good as the other tanks, or sorry, the other DPS that I've seen. Bear and Blood DK unfortunately saw no changes, except basically no one really wants to play Bear at all on PTR because it had one thing going for it, and then Blizzard said it's unintended, so now it has nothing going for it, unfortunately. Blood DK, as we mentioned in earlier videos, suffers from the success of DPS DKs. It kind of like just got minus 3% haste and lost Avon Blim and got nothing back, so I don't know, GG's I guess. Fury Warrior, honestly I haven't seen someone play Fury Warrior, but everyone is dooming about it, so I just put it in B tier. I honestly should probably put it down here because I haven't really got a chance to play with it. Ellie Shaman seems like it's down horrendous with the tier set nerf. Like it seems like Enhanced Shaman was better than Ellie Shaman, and then Ellie Shaman got a bigger nerf to the tier set than Enhanced, so that's kind of crazy. And Holy Priest, still have only seen like one person play Holy Priest. It seemed okay, but not great, so we're putting it in B. And all the DPS here haven't really had the chance to play with. Unholy, we did play with, but not since it got buffed, so I'm leaving it here. Could easily be S+, could easily be S. Not really sure where it belongs. All right, that's it for the update. Thank you for watching. Peace out.